Hey, hello,
Hello,
hello.
hello. Hey, how are you?
Yeah.
I feel like things have just been absolutely insane here. How about you guys? Give me updates on life and everything going on.
Yeah, so everybody in the chat, just let us know where are you from, what's going on in your life, how are you doing, how are you managing the OCD, how's life? I feel you too, Liz. It's like the week before the conference, and there's so much going on with obviously with work and clients and stuff, and then trying to get all the talks ready and getting all the logistic ready for the trip. So it's always the week before the conference is mayhem. Mayhem, mayhem.
Yeah, I feel like I need like a detox or something, some sort of like mental. So we had a hurricane here last Monday. It hit, and it has been, or no, yeah, last Monday. I can't get my days straight. And it was really tough. So it has been. We've been without power. We got power back on Saturday here at the clinic, and it's just so difficult. And I feel like I just want to give a shout out today to healthcare workers because it is like so hard to show up for your patients and to show up and be present for someone else when your own basic needs aren't being met, like hot water and groceries and refrigerator and all these sort of things. So anyway, it's been a lot here in Houston. And then, of course, with everything that went on this weekend in our country, I know that there's a lot of anxiety and stress and ways that either people's OCD or anxiety are amplified around this and all the other world events. And so I just like want to show up today for a second and just say that I feel like things have been heavy for so many people. And this is a space for us to kind of hopefully take a deep breath, get some support, feel safe. And that's an environment that's really critical that Chris and I can create.
Yeah, no, it's already what I always tell people is having OCD, and typically OCD comes with co-occurring disorders, is already difficult enough. And then, like you're saying, I mean, people are trying to navigate the people that are getting treatment through your center and people that are getting, living in your area are trying to navigate treatment or navigating their disorder while there's no power, while there's difficulty getting basic needs met. And that's such a challenge. And there's things going on for people. And yeah, it's really, really difficult. I think you forget. We saw a little of that during 2020 where couldn't get toilet paper, couldn't get basic things, and you take those for granted and you're just like, oh
Totally.
my God, this is super difficult. How are the clients? Because I always think like one thing I try to tell my clients at least is like the OCD has you prepare for everything and it never works because life throws so many twists and turns. And sometimes people don't like the message of treatment, which is like, hey, there's going to be things in life you can't control. There's going to be surprises. There's going to be doubts. There's going to be uncertainties. There's going to be all these different things. And the treatment is saying, okay, what can I control and what do I have to let go of? So how are your clients dealing with just, not having some things that obviously people expect,
I feel like for many of our clients, this was a big trigger. So some of them probably, I hope, feel empowered that they kind of went through this and that they're doing well and managing symptoms as best as they can. I think our staff were really the rock stars because they showed up and tried their best to make it not feel like it was a huge impact on clients, like, being prepared and having the things that we think we would need and making sure meals and things were covered. But everybody just feels like a bit defeated. Like I feel like after these natural disasters, you kind of like band together during and then afterwards it's worse because everyone's just like, oh my gosh, I'm like depleted, like emotionally and physically. So it's tough, but we're hanging in there. And I think at the end of the day, most of us recognize in situations like this, even though it's challenging and it's hard and it's exhausting and draining, that man, we can really do hard things. And that sometimes some of these things that might have been super triggering and super anxiety provoking anticipatory wise, like thinking about it, worrying about it when it actually was here, many people weather it pretty well, all things considered.
Yeah, one thing that I see in my clients a lot is they'll tell me these examples of, I had a client who the house behind their house lit on fire and they kind of jumped in, called 911, directed the fire department to the house. Or, I had another client from group that, son was choking on a toy and had to call 911. And clients will ask me, like, how come I'm able to jump in and really handle those kind of situations? And it's like, because those situations are occurring. With OCD, everything is about the past and reflecting on choices you made or trying to prepare for the future, prevent future problems from happening. And in OCD, you can't control or fix or change things that aren't currently occurring. So it's, I've always seen my clients, they'll say like, yeah, in real stressful situations, I'm able to like jump in and handle it.
Show up.
but like the OCD ones, I can't. And I'm like, that's because you're trying to fix something. We don't take our car into the auto body shop and be like, fix my car. And they take a quick look and they're like, we don't see any damage. And you're like, I know, but fix the future damage. They look at you like sideways, like, what? Come back when it's damaged. So I think we forget that with OCD. We're trying to fix situations that either will never occur or might occur slightly or occur, but down the road. And so that's one of the points of treatment, is to sort of learn how to kind of accept and let go and say, okay, there's nothing I can do except this. And so people seem to rise above. I always remember John Grayson saying, like, after treatment, people with OCD typically are better able to handle what life throws at them. And I really, truly believe that.
Totally. 100%. And I think that so many of us, we're worried about the unknown, but when we're in the face of it, we're actually able to handle it. And that's when actually, like, wow, of course, nobody wants you to have to face these things or these things to happen. It really does build confidence and trust in yourself that, wow, like, I've been so worried about something. And even when it did happen, like, I was able to handle it. Right. I might have been stressed. Yeah, I might have been anxious. And I called 911. I navigated them to the house and like helped address this thing that was going on that was terrifying. Right. This fire. So well, good to see you. We will be calmer by next week. I hope that we kind of will decompress a little bit. So let's talk a little bit before we hop into our live stream of like, what is next week, and tell everybody a little bit about the conference, Chris.
Yeah, no, I'm really excited, and I'm excited for the people that can't make it in person, because I'll, say the second part. But the IOCDF conference is really sort of what I think of as like the hub of everything that IOCDF does. We're so excited now that we can offer you these live streams. I keep telling the foundation, it gives people like a year-round connection with resources, education, and community. So all of that IOCDF community that everybody loves comes together, and there's people from all over the globe. This year it's in Orlando, and basically I think of it as 4 days, Thursday through Sunday. People like to come in a little earlier, leave a little later to see the sights of the city it's in. But this year in Orlando, there's going to be about 2,000 of us that are going to be at this conference. You're going to hear from experts that treat OCD and related disorders from all over the globe, get different perspectives, and also people with lived experience who have overcome some really hard parts of the disorder are going to share their stories. There's also support groups, there's activities, there's a Saturday night party, there's awards being given out. There's a keynote, Daniela Pearson, who runs Wondermind, an organization for mental health, alongside Selena Gomez and her mom. She's our keynote this year, and she has OCD. You're going to have people like Liz, myself, and people from the live streams that you see a lot, and people that you've chatted with in the chats in these live streams. So everybody comes together in Orlando. There's stuff for therapists, for researchers, for family members, for parents, for loved ones. It's just an amazing time. And I think for me, it's a way to connect. And in the past, for me, especially when I was struggling, it's just people feel recharged and feel energetic to go. I will say quickly that for people that can't make it in person, because we understand, there is a virtual component this year, and it's really cost effective. It's not very expensive at all. I was talking to some members of my group that are doing the virtual option, and they're like, it's only $75. It's super affordable. So a lot of the conference will be live streamed, and if you purchase a virtual ticket, you could join us virtually and still get the community aspect and watch some of the conference presentations. So we hope that you'll join us at some capacity, either virtually or in person. How about for you, Liz? Like, how does it feel, just being literally a week from now, we'll be in Orlando?
Oh, I'm just so excited. I feel like the conference is like the most energizing time of my life. I do get exhausted after. So like Monday at work a week from Monday, I feel like I'm going to be a zombie, because you are kind of go, go, go. But one thing that I've learned, you guys, and I feel really strongly about this, is that I think the OCD community is the greatest mental health community that exists. And I feel like we are family. We are so close. We support each other. And we just have this this amazing community, both a community of individuals, family members, and clinicians that come together in one place, connect, collaborate, and give time. The thing Michael Janicki always taught me is, when I think about like my greatest mentor in my life, is that the greatest gift you can give someone is the gift of time, right? The greatest gift you can give someone is availability. And I love that at the conference, everybody is available to anybody, right? You can grab somebody who you've read their book and looked up to them for years in the hallway and ask questions. You can grab someone that you've seen on a live stream and talk to them and chat. And anyway, it's just such a cool experience. And I think the conference just really always like re-energizes me about and provides me with so much gratitude for this incredible community. So I'm just really excited. I know I'll be kind of exhausted, but you can find me at the OCDI Texas or IOCDF booth. I will always be at one of those booths if I'm not in a talk, so that you can come grab me, grab Chris. Like, it was so fun last year and the year before and all of them, but like so many people who we've seen on live streams, we've talked to y'all virtually, to get to meet you in person and connect.
Yeah, one thing that you pointed, and I want to highlight an exclamation point, is one thing I love about this is, I've been to so many different conferences, whether it's mental health or entertainment, and a lot of times the person speaks and then goes through a curtain in the back and you never hear from them. I think what makes this so unique is what you said, is you can see a therapist that maybe you read their book or saw them on a live stream that really changed the course of your wellness, and actually like go up and speak to them. I mean, I'm always seeing people grab Liz or Ethan or John Hirschfield or John Grayson, et cetera, like in the hallways and having full on conversations. I think that's amazing. And then it's always nice to meet all the people that come up and are like, "Where's Liz?" So they're always like,
yeah, Chris and I were laughing because Chris and I are definitely like work husband and wife, and everybody, when they would see one of us, they'd be like, "Well, where's the other person?" As if like we have to do everything together, which I'm fine with that, Chris. We can, but it's
we need
so
to like
funny
share each other's location. Like, what is that? Family 360 or something?
Yes,
and I'm like, he's currently in line getting a coffee. Like,
yeah, if you can't find me, that is probably where I am. So, but we're excited. We're really looking forward to it. So let's talk a little bit about what to expect. So for those of you coming to the conference, it is an incredible convention and conference specifically for OCD, anxiety, and related disorders. If you go to IOCDF.org, you can get information about the app that we have, that you can go ahead and sign up for the app now, which I recommend doing. If not, I absolutely recommend going to IOCDF and looking up the conference schedule. I love to, so like my little thing I do is I always print it out, and on the plane, I like highlight all the talks. And that's when I start thinking about what do I want to go to, what's important for me to be at and not, and vice versa, and create my own little schedule. I will say, you guys, that one of the feedback we get is that the conference feels overwhelming at times because there's so much going on. So the feedback I can give for anybody attending this year is try to find ways that you can like organize your conference experience prior to attending the conference, so is there ways that you can start to organize that really well now? And if so, I think that would be really, really useful. And so it's nice to remember, you can jump from talk to talk. If there's 2 talks at an hour that you really want to go to, you can go in one for a little bit, grab the pamphlets, and go to the other. Don't feel like you always have to pick and choose. And I think that was something I really needed to learn, because I'd be like, I don't know which one to go to. I don't know what to do. And I'm like anxious about it. And so you can certainly consider going to both. And then, of course, please engage in the support groups. Please talk to people, connect, because I think the way the conference becomes memorable is if you feel like you connect with the community there and you feel like you get to know other folks. And so if you're watching live streams, write in the chat. Why don't people in the chat right now share if you're coming to the conference and if you're going to be there, if you're going to be in Orlando next week, so that other folks who you've already connected with or y'all been chatting with through these virtual live streams, y'all can connect in person and have a couple people. Because if you have 1 or 2 people that you know, I feel like it just gives such a great sense of comfort and support as you're like navigating the conference weekend, but also then to meet other people together. And so there are so many support groups and small groups that are intentional for that reason, as a way to really connect and really be much more discussion based and not just this like panel lecture.
Absolutely. I would say that the social, it's funny. It's kind of like when I tell my clients when they're choosing which college to go to and they're trying to figure it out, I always tell them like part of the education is going somewhere where you're going to meet people and have a community you really like and a lifestyle that you enjoy. And it's the same with a conference. The learning is incredible. And the cool thing about signing up, whether it's virtually or in person, you get access to all the presenter slides. So on the app, if you register, like people last year used to be able to go on the app or go online if they registered for the conference and look up the slides. So if you miss some of the talks, that's fine. Take advantage of meeting other people. Even if you're shy, experience social anxiety, or just in general aren't somebody that usually goes up to random people, there's going to be so many things you can join where there's going to be encouragement for people to get to know each other in the audience as attendees. And it's super part of the conference and the connections you'll make. I mean, so many people show up to the conference not knowing anyone, meet somebody else, they remain friends throughout the year, and then sometimes they end up coming back to the conference and volunteering, or they come back to the conference and presenting together. So I think that's a cool kind of full circle moment that you can be part of. So definitely that. Also, a lot of the IOCDF advocates are going to be there. I don't know if they're going to have a pin, but you may recognize them. So you can go up to them, ask them questions, talk to them. A lot of us, would love to kind of direct you. Hey, go to this. People are getting to know each other at this event. It'd be great for you to hang out. I know Thursday night, there's a lot of kind of icebreaker, get to know each other activities. So definitely make sure to join those.
Yeah, and I just want to take a quick second to just say what the conference means to us. For both Chris and I, the conference was a place where we really got to recognize for the first time that we weren't alone and that there was help available. And so make sure as you're feeling those feelings at the conference that you slow down and let them absorb. Because I feel like sometimes we're so busy and doing so many things that we don't really get to just say, whoa, like this experience is amazing and I feel connected and I recognize that I'm not alone now.
Yeah, I just want to say, like, if you can't make the conference in person or you can't make the conference virtually, we understand. What I would just really encourage you, if you have an affiliate in the area or something, is to go to something that's community based. Liz has done a lot of community based stuff in Texas. I've done a lot of stuff in Southern California. I mean, I just think back to my first conference. I was a mess. I was like newly in treatment. I couldn't even stay we weren't going to stay the whole weekend. I think we were going to go for 2 days. I happened to have family right next door to the conference, planned on staying there, going back the second day. And I just got so triggered the first day I had to leave. But some of you have already heard this story, but for me, it was like walking around, didn't know which talk to go to. I think my mom found in the booklet, she's like, oh, there's, this family and they're talking. And we walked in and I saw Liz and I are around the same age. And I remember seeing her and being like, okay, she's like my age. And we sat down and luckily I was super open. I was just very triggered, but I was open enough that I was able to pay attention to Liz and hear her story and see her get better and her talk about it. And I remember leaving and I felt very defeated because something triggered me contamination wise and harm wise. I remember the both of them kind of kicking my butt probably about 5 or 6 hours after I saw Liz speak. And I remember crying on the way home and feeling like it was a waste. But then my mom and I really reflecting, and she asked if I got anything from it. I could not remember any of the talks, but I remember seeing Liz and that she could get better. And that was the first person I saw getting better who had OCD. And many of you watching these live streams may feel hopeless at times, like you can't get better. So hearing from Liz, and then hopefully for you guys, finding, hope and hearing stories of people getting better. Because I think that's what's so great about the advocacy and people coming back to the conference and speaking is people like Liz are giving people hope, and you can get that hope as well. So even if you
and you too, Chris, you're giving people hope. It's not just me.
Well, I'm here because of you. And it's crazy because I'm sure, at that moment you weren't like, I'm going to make sure that guy in the audience right now, his life has changed. Right. But it's just so cool that the conference allows people not only to hear from clinicians, but people that are getting better and what they did. And the other thing, one of my clients in the group asked is they were like, I feel like everybody at the conference is better and I'm going to be the only one that's struggling. And it's like, no, there's a lot of people that are struggling too at all different areas of their treatment. But there's also a lot of messages of hope, and it's super important to hear.
Absolutely. So let's talk about, because we have a question at 11:16. If we can't attend in person, can we attend online?
Yeah, so it's really cool. If you go to the IOCDF's website, Rachel could put the specific link in. But this year, for the first time ever, there's a virtual component. And I know the IOCDF has their virtual conference this November, but what's going to be a little bit different about this one is it's actually going to be live. It's going to be live streamed at the event. So I always, because I've watched some conferences that I haven't been able to attend. There was one at Harvard on body image that was fascinating to me. I just couldn't make it out there. But there's something about you feel like you're there because it's live streamed. You hear the audience, you hear the clapping, you see the performers, the presenters live. So please head over to the website, iocdf.org. I believe it's iocdf.org/conferences. if you look at the 29th annual conference that's in Orlando next week, if you click on the virtual options, a lot of my clients are doing it because I'm in the West Coast and it's a little hard for them to get out. But it shows you which talks you have access to, and you get from the comfort of your home, from wherever you are in the globe, you get to watch and participate. And there's going to be that energy in the room that you'll be a part of as well.
Totally. Yes. So excited. It's going to be so much fun. Let's hop in because I know we're already 20 minutes in, but we're really looking forward to seeing y'all. And if you're there, please come say hi to Chris and I. We'd love getting to say hi to y'all, meet you in person. We'll be upset if you don't do that. So if it's an exposure for you, make it an opportunity to do that exposure and say hi. So please visit IOCDF.org/conference. It should be IOCDF.org/conference for more info. All right, so as y'all know, our live streams are intended to be educational, supportive, and hopefully an opportunity for you to connect and get some much needed, oftentimes support, but they are not intended to replace therapy. If you are feeling like you have specific therapy questions, you need specific help around your own treatment, please seek out an individual therapist in your area. Of course, we would encourage you to find someone who specializes in your disorder. And of course, if you're feeling unsafe or suicidal, please call 911-988 or your local emergency line. IOCDF and/or our live streams are not crisis hotlines, and we cannot manage crisis situations. So let's hop in. Chris, I know we've got lots of questions. So you guys, today is an Ask the Expert. It's been a while since we've had one of these, but the way these work is that we've got a lot of pre-submitted questions that we will start to go through. And then of course, we'll answer questions live. So if you have any questions for us to answer today and you want answered, please put them in the pane on the right-hand side of your screen. Sorry, mirror makes it my left. And you can put any questions and we're going to answer those live. And then otherwise, we're also going to hop into pre-submitted questions. So the first live question, Chris, that we're going to go to at 11:08 is, can you talk about GAD versus OCD?
Yeah, so GAD stands for Generalized Anxiety Disorder, and in OCD, obviously, we know is Obsessive Compulsive Disorder. I will say the DSM says about 76% of people with OCD will also be diagnosed with a co-occurring anxiety disorder. That may be generalized anxiety disorder, social phobia, also known as social anxiety disorder, separation anxiety, etc. Now, generalized anxiety disorder, you really want to see an expert in OCD to really parse these two, because I would say, I don't know if Liz agrees, but one of the biggest barriers to people getting OCD treatment is that they were diagnosed with generalized anxiety disorder for years, and they're not getting exposure response prevention. They may get traditional cognitive behavioral therapy, which is not a bad treatment at all. It's just specific, not always, as useful for OCD. And so people have not been targeting the intrusive thoughts, the core fears, and the exposure. So generalized anxiety disorder, the best way to think about it is an individual feels a heightened sense of anxiety, a heightened anxiety experience, almost like a sensitivity to anxiety around things that cause them worry and cause them stress. Typically, these are things that we find that a lot of people also are concerned about. It may be, using public transport for the first time. It might be having to speak and do a presentation at school. It might be that you're running late to get to the airport. And the person with generalized anxiety disorder finds themselves in a lot of anxiety. It's really hard for them to breathe. They're panicking, etc. But typically, once that issue is resolved, they find their anxiety go back kind of to neutral and they feel calm. They don't have these obsessions throughout the day around a situation. There may be some anxiety coming up or leading up to an event, but it isn't that they're at home, like watching a movie and having a great time, and then starting to worry about something that's 6 months down the road. When we see OCD, we have these intrusive thoughts that are very abrasive. Sometimes they can come as images, feelings, sensations, and they're occurring throughout the day, especially for somebody who's severe. They might be experiencing it every hour. Typically, the obsessions don't feel as logical to somebody who doesn't have OCD, whereas generalized anxiety disorder, I always think if you talk to your friends about it, some of them would nod along who also have anxiety as well. But in OCD, it's these things that people feel are a little bit more out of sort of like the world of rationale. And in generalized anxiety disorder, there's not always compulsions. There might be some avoidance, but in OCD, the compulsion component is key. So just make sure you get a proper diagnosis. We see people in anxiety treatment and they're doing deep breathing and they're doing box breathing and they're doing relaxation techniques for OCD and don't find it helpful.
Yeah. So the thing I always say to differentiate is that OCD is bizarre intrusive thoughts, where like GAD is more like normal intrusive thoughts, right? So like thoughts about like, is my boss upset with me? Or am I in the right job? Or am I going to be happy in this relationship? Or what if I get in a car accident, right? Kind of these thoughts that are more normalized that people have, but they become disordered when they start to interfere with life and functioning, right? Versus just it's a thought that someone has, where OCD tends to be more of like that irrational component, right? Like, oh, what if I accidentally sent something inappropriate to my boss and they're upset with me because of that? And then you go start checking your emails, even though you know, like you didn't do that. And that's a bizarre thought, if that makes sense. So, so the follow-up then was that I got diagnosed with GAD at my psychiatrist, but I still have OCD symptoms. So as Chris said, it is so common for there to be a comorbid diagnosis of both GAD and OCD. So just because you have a GAD diagnosis doesn't mean you don't have OCD and vice versa. But what I will also say is that GAD is commonly misdiagnosed, like for OCD, in the sense that a lot of clinicians who may not understand OCD might diagnose GAD when it could be OCD. So I would encourage you to see an OCD and anxiety specialist and help them differentiate both. Next question at 11:09, is there a connection between thyroid disorder and intrusive OCD?
Well, one thing that I remember that they really, really pushed in grad school, and it was such a great like check, a reminder, is it's never a bad thing to do a full like medical checkup. I remember that was something that nobody in the OCD field ever talked to me about. And when I was in grad school, it was like one of the first things you should always do. And I remember taking my licensing exam, and if that question, they told us if that question was on there, do that. Because there are some people who unless I'm totally wrong, because I haven't seen it, there isn't a correlation between or causation between somebody experiencing either hyper or hypothyroid and OCD. But what we find is like when somebody is having sometimes these health conditions, like I know I've had a lot of clients that are going through menopause and they're having hormonal changes and they're finding that their OCD is coming out louder than it ever has been before and we're struggling, or the hormonal changes in perinatal OCD. So for some people, there are these other health conditions, and I've never had someone say that it's caused it, but the change in hormones, et cetera, sometimes fatigue or whatever, may contribute to somebody's just overall anxiety experience. And we know when we're heightened anxiety, we're more likely to give into OCD and et cetera. So one thing I always kind of ask in my assessments with clients is, are you currently experiencing any health conditions, physical health conditions, not ones that people with OCD are kind of creating in their head, but legitimate, diagnosed, you're on medication, et cetera, because it's important. Sometimes my clients are dealing with Hashimoto's or other things, and they're not getting it treated, and then they're really struggling. So I would just say that, make sure that you kind of check it, but I haven't heard any causation, just it may impact somebody's wellness.
Sorry, I'm muted. I do think there are some correlations at times to thyroid and mental health. And so it is really important to have that treated, right? As is for any medical issue, but it wouldn't once your thyroid is treated, I think what Chris and I are saying is it wouldn't necessarily change the treatment we would do for OCD or anxiety.
Yeah.
Lots of folks on here from Houston saying Beryl was wild and glad everything's okay. It was. So, oh goodness. Hope everybody is taking care of yourself, because it has been a lot. There is no doubt. So, next question is, there's a conference question at 11:16. I'll be there. Is there a way to pre-plan without manually adding the sessions to my calendar? I wish I had access to an Excel doc version. I can't remember, Chris. Is there a way on the app to create your own schedule?
Yeah, so I loved the app, and I haven't downloaded the new app for this year, but last year I did it old school like you, Liz, where I literally, it's over there, but I printed out like a blank weekly calendar for the week, and I just started filling in by hand, like, Chris, you have to be here by here by here. But then I was so mad because at the hotel I was playing around with the app, and you can do that. So you can go through the calendar and kind of pick which talks or which events you want to be at, and you click on it, and then you go to a calendar in the app, and it shows you all the different talks that you had highlighted. So this year I'm just going to use the app. Last year I did a handwritten one, and I was like running around pulling out this paper trying to read my writing. But then the app, once I figured it out, it was so much nicer. You just open it up and it shows you what you're going to in a very kind of clear way. I would say almost better than an Excel doc. So Irina, I would definitely check out the app. The app is free. So you just head over to the app, download it, and you can start clicking away. Plus the slides day of will be on the app. So you can even look at the slides ahead of time before talks.
Yeah, 100%. And I love being able to do that. And I agree with you too. It would be so hard if you have to like manage all these different calendars at the same time. So hopefully IOCDF can post the app on here so that y'all can go ahead and download it now and get going. So
While you're looking I'll toss the question that was pre-submitted. So someone asked, is there OCD around the feeling of clothing or other textures? My young daughter doesn't want to wear some clothes or uniform. She fixates on the feeling of itchiness.
This is a really good question, and we get this a lot. So typically, no, actually. So usually when there is sensory kind of avergence to certain sensory or certain sensations or sensory, issues, that would fall more under a sensory disorder, which could be like sensory disorder. It could be autism, and there could be other things that are the reason for it. The only time I do see this in OCD is when it's more about just right. So for example, sometimes kids will like redo the, I don't know what you would call it, but like the way their socks are on their legs and like, move their socks up and down until it feels just right. But it's more about it feeling just right. And that could be OCD versus I don't like this texture. I don't like this feeling, or I don't like this material. That would fall more under sensory.
Yeah, I would say the only time we really see like more OCD around is like sensor motor OCD. So that might be like the placement of your tongue, your breathing, your chewing, your blinking. I will say, always whenever I have a client, when I'm talking to the parents and they're talking about that their child really, really struggles with like textures and tags and stuff, I always ask, has the person, been evaluated for autism or maybe a sensory processing disorder, because that can be a sign of it. But I have had clients, for instance, where it's not really the same thing, but like I had a client who was like, if my tie is too tight and I can feel it on my neck, I won't be able to concentrate in my presentation. So sometimes OCD can fixate. But if you have a young kid who just really doesn't like tags and textures and stuff, just like Liz said, I would get it properly diagnosed. I think a lot of times I was asked this at a talk I did at USC this week, and someone was like, how do I know? It's for their med school. And they're like, sometimes it feels like a client has like ADHD or generalized anxiety or OCD. And I always talk about, go back to the motive. What is really bringing it on? Remember, for OCD, a lot of people get so triggered out of a place of fear, a place of concern, a place of distress. Where some of these other disorders like ADHD, someone is just not paying attention, not because of intrusive thoughts, but because they're fixated on something they find much more pleasurable.
100%. Let's go to pre-submitted. We're all caught up on live.
Yeah. So how do we, this is always a good one. How do we determine which fears are rational and which are not? For instance, I'm taking medication for OCD, but feeling scared about things like microplastics and PFOA chemicals. This feels kind of rational for me. So that's a good question. Like, how can we tell if something is a rational fear or an irrational fear? It
is a really good question. And the answer is like, there's not a clear answer on this, because actually like we're all going to, I don't know the right word, but like there is no way for me. Some things in life aren't clear, right? It's like, like you might feel like you need to eat organic and that's important to you, where I might not care as much about that. Or I drink Diet Coke and you might never want to drink a Diet Coke. And so it is really important to know, like, I want you to think a little bit about, if I didn't have anxiety, how would I manage this? And COVID, I feel like, was a perfect opportunity for people to practice and understand this. But COVID was something that everybody, when COVID was happening, and then of course when we started to come out of the pandemic, and even now, have to have their own standards of like, what were my safety behaviors, right? What was I comfortable with versus what I was not comfortable with versus what was anxiety, right? And I think that for many of us, it shifted, right? I remember when COVID first started, I was cleaning my groceries because it's what we were being told to do. And then, as we didn't have to do that, I was able to remove it. But there was a little anxiety even in removing it. I was like, I know I don't need to do this anymore, but now I feel anxious because it's been so ingrained that I'm supposed to do some of these behaviors. So what I want us to really think about is, does it feel urgent and anxiety provoking? Or is it something that we're able to kind of think about and process and have our own standard or stances on? And so what I mean by that is that if, for example, if I decide that I am going to cut red dye out of my life, let's just make something up. And I say, like, I feel like that's something that I just want to do. Like, I've read a lot about it, and maybe it's something I'm not interested in it being a part of my life, which, by the way, this isn't me, but let's just say. Um, it's like, it feels like that would be like, oh, if I came to that on my own, I read about it and I've decided for like different reasons, like I want to just not have that. Maybe I'm really going to work hard to try to change my lifestyle or get rid of certain things in my house, but maybe I'm not going to be like super rigid about it. And if something did have red dye that I accidentally ate or ingested, I'm not then researching and becoming kind of obsessive about and being really triggered by, but instead I'm like, oh man, like I didn't know that had red dye. Next time I won't eat that, right? So think about it of like, am I able to respond with flexibility, even though I'm making this change in my life, or like this is a rule or something that I do want to follow, versus is it rigid? Is it anxiety provoking, and is it urgent? And I think that if you can really look at that, it'll help you to differentiate both. But the reality is that there is no right answer, right? For some folks, they feel very strong about plastics and certain things, and that's more of just that's how it is, and I feel strongly about that, and I don't want that in my life. For some people like me, we don't care about it at all, and so there's not a right or wrong, but it's as long as it's not driven by OCD, right? And so driven by OCD would be if we did come in contact with it, even though we can't do anything about it, we're super triggered, trying to figure it out, trying to solve it, trying to understand it, feeling like it's really urgent, it's really dangerous, versus being able to just be thoughtful about it and make a decision in our life or our lifestyle.
Yeah, the only thing I'll add, because you were super thorough, the only thing I'll add is their flexibility. Somebody
Right.
may have a preference and it can be flexible. So for instance, if somebody enjoys sitting at this seat at the kitchen table, I've had family members ask, like, is that a preference? And the person, it's like, well, why don't you try a different chair and let's just see. And if you can do it and there's no angst, there's no, really problem with it, great. So it's difficult. The other thing I'll say is what I always talk to clients about is like there's a range of normalcy, because people will say, is this rational or not? And the problem is some people have different belief systems. Some people take their shoes off in the home, some don't. Some people, the families wash their hands before a meal, some don't. Some people shower before bed, others shower in the morning. So there isn't a right or wrong, but there's a range of normalcy that us as a society, backed by the scientific community, have said, hey, this kind of makes sense. So some people are more clean than others, or more thorough in school, and some are less thorough, and you can be anywhere on that spectrum. Nobody's asking you to go to the extreme and like fail school or never shower again, but if you're over here in this side, outside of the range, it's probably OCD. So kind of looking at a range of normalcy.
100%. Next question is, sorry, y'all are asking each other questions, which is awesome, and talking to each other. I love that. So I don't want to announce those. So next question for us is at 11:35. What about my wife has OCD and thyroid? How can I support my wife and be there for her?
Yeah, I mean, I would say it's probably a little bit different on how you can support for each. So, I have thyroid issues in my family, family members with both hyper and hypo. Some of it's affected some family members, like my aunt, a lot more than my sister, let's say. A lot of times when it comes to the medical part, one of the symptoms I see, I don't know what your wife is experiencing with thyroid issues, but a lot of fatigue, sometimes feeling tired, sometimes feeling burnt out. So just having those conversations, often when people have a medical condition that prevents them from fully engaging in life, they feel a lot of guilt, a lot of shame. I'm so sorry I'm putting you through this. So I think having those conversations with your wife, if she's struggling a little bit with her thyroid, that, hey, I don't judge you, what can we do? With that, it would be a lot more accommodating support. How can I help you? With OCD, of course, you want to give support as well, but you want to give it in a little different manner. So you're always thinking, how can I best prop up my wife, and how can I minimize the attention and the effort we're putting into the disorder? So an example would be if you're at a restaurant and your wife, I'm just using an example, but let's say she's struggling with contamination, wants to leave the restaurant early, it'd be talking her through it. Okay, what tools do you have? If your therapist was here with us right now, what would be some things they'd encourage? Is there any way you could kind of go in the bathroom, splash some cold water on your wrist and cool down a little bit, and come out, and we can kind of brainstorm a little bit about how we can maybe push, maybe 20 more minutes before we leave, so we have some victories. So, asking your wife and her therapist, how involved do they want you to be. And at the end of the day, just loving that person. And I always say the love can be loving but firm against the OCD, but most of us just want somebody to be there to support us through these difficult moments. But in OCD, you just have to make sure that you're not accommodating consistently by answering questions or shifting the way you live in the home simply because of the OCD.
Yeah, and remembering you can send that message of I love you, but I don't love your OCD, right? So how can we still be supportive, but and be firm with the fact that we don't want to enable OCD, but we want to enable you in your life, and that can be hard. But I also believe strongly in, if your wife is in therapy, joining at least one session, because I think it's really helpful to learn from the clinician what you guys are working on, all of the things that you're doing, like all of the above. So I think that's really important. Another question at 11:36. I idolize people who are able to do things easily, like drive, and I feel so disabled that I can't even comprehend to do anything. It makes me want to hide my lack of skill.
Yeah, I would say one difficult things that we hear all the time from our clients, and what Liz and I have experienced ourselves since we both have OCD, is we see people living easily, and we do get jealous sometimes. I would get extremely jealous that people were just able to sit down somewhere or be in public, or at holidays. Like, I used to have some intrusive sexual thoughts around family members, and I'm like, everybody's hugging each other and hanging out in the living room, and I'm like in the bathroom, like doing checking of my growing area, right? So it's like we always kind of feel that. What I do want to say, though, is the good thing is that there's treatment that's extremely effective. So what I would say is remind yourself that it's a process. You may not be where you want to be today, but that comparison is like the thief of happiness, right? So they're where they're at because they don't experience obsessive compulsive disorder, right? And so my goal was always to try to do a little bit better each day. And I remember talking myself through, like, next Christmas, I want to be able to walk in and hug everyone too. So I had very specific goals and worked towards it. But remember, you'll get there. Treatment is a process. It's a learning tool. It takes time to shift the way you've been living, understanding what's going on in your head, why you're doing the things you're doing, starting to challenge those and grow and trust. Just give yourself patience and grace. So right now you're at that point, but if you continue on your treatment journey, there will be a point that you'll be driving easily. Always remember, in treatment, you can start slow. You don't have to be driving on the freeway late at night the first couple times you push back against it. Sometimes just sitting in your car is enough of an exposure to get yourself comfortable and back in the mindset of driving.
100%. And here's what I'll say. This is what values-based ERP is all about, right? If you're feeling like, gosh, I'm frustrated, they can do that and I want to do that, that's what we're going to focus on in treatment, right? Treatment should start with the things that you really want to get back to, the things that would help build your confidence, your self-esteem, and make you feel good again. And so values-based ERP would say, okay, like, let's get you back to driving. Yes, it's going to be hard. Yes, it's going to be challenging, but you can do it. And let's do exposures and ERP work to get you there and get you there successfully.
Well said. Can I throw out a pre-submitted? Somebody said, yeah, I still cannot find myself to find another ERP therapist since I didn't have a great therapist previously that claimed he was an OCD specialist. What should I be looking for in an OCD therapist? So for people that maybe didn't have good treatment in the past or are starting their journey, what are some main components that people should look for in an OCD therapist?
Yeah, so the biggest thing I want to know is, obviously, what disorders do they treat? We want to know that they have really strong background and ability to treat all anxiety disorders, and specifically OCD. So anxiety disorders alone doesn't mean somebody can treat OCD. The second thing is, I want to know what and where they receive their training for ERP. So I usually start by simply saying, do you treat OCD? If they say yes, I say, great, what treatment do you use? And if on their own, they don't say ERP, I would say, thank you very much, and move on. If somebody says, oh, I do CBT, or I do cognitive therapy, or I do exposures, that's not exposure with response prevention. ERP is very different than exposure therapy or cognitive behavioral therapy. You need them to say ERP specifically. And then, of course, I want to be able to say, all right, where did you get your training, right? I want to know, in the ideal situation, is that they've had some specialty OCD training. So whether that's through BTCI at IOCDF, or whether that's because they did their internship or training years at an OCD program or a place that specializes in OCD, and they learned under a supervisor who's well-known, or not necessarily well-known, but like has experience and background in OCD, that's really what I would want to know. And those would be the first questions I would ask. And then the second is to remember that you're also interviewing your clinician for fit, you want to make sure that you mesh well with them, that they mesh well with you, and that you feel like it's going to be a good therapeutic relationship, because you need to be able to trust each other. You need to be able to work together.
Yeah, one thing I do, like a lot of times people will reach out to me. I run a family group and we get parents all the time from all over the globe, and they'll send me like, does this person look like they legitimately know OCD? First thing I always do is go on the website. I go to what they treat. If they treat, most people aren't going to just put OCD, and that's okay. Because a lot of these disorders, people can treat OCD and BDD, for instance, right? But do the disorders match, right? So if they're treating like, childhood trauma, couples relations, hard to move out of the house, spirituality, Reiki, tapping. They also treat like struggles at work, and like OCD is kind of thrown in and doesn't really feel like it's the fit. That's always a caution for me. But if I look on the website and they treat OCD and related disorders and that's their focus, that's a good first step. Then I go on their website about treatment modalities. If ERP is not mentioned, like Liz says, one thing that I want to caution people is there's a lot of people coming out and saying, I can treat OCD without ERP. ERP should always be a main component. Why? Because we know there's so much research behind it. So I always look for that. There's other things like ACT, different modalities that are also very helpful, but I want to make sure that they at least know ERP, right? That needs to be a foundation on there. If I see that, then I will reach out, or I'll encourage the family to reach out and ask those questions Liz talked about. But that's how you can navigate a website, because sometimes that's your first relation or your first experience with that provider.
Yeah, 100%. We are caught up on live questions, so I'll let you keep going.
I have a bunch of pre-submitted. So somebody said, what is the best way to treat meta OCD obsessions? And so usually with meta OCD, this person was talking about the two big ones, either like fear of obsessing. So like they've been doing really well for a while, and then they're so worried that they're going to obsess again, and then they start obsessing about obsessing. Or a lot of times in meta OCD, people really want to get better, so they get very fixated on doing the treatment perfectly. So if somebody is not really even anymore struggling with like harm, and it's more about just like the presence of obsessions or trying to do treatment perfectly to get rid of OCD, how can someone navigate meta OCD?
The same way, right? So remember, the components of ERP don't change no matter what subtype you have of OCD. So if you are focused on doing OCD perfectly or doing exposures perfectly, we're going to purposely have you allow space for that fear and not answer it. So we want to really focus on not getting stuck in, am I doing it perfectly? Oh, okay, I am. Oh, this is working. Like anything that you're doing to confirm that you are doing treatment perfectly, if that's one of the fears, is actually just feeding your OCD, right? And so treatment's going to look like being able to actually sometimes do ERP a little bit imperfectly, right? They not necessarily do it in this rigid, perfect way, but do it with flexibility and move through it. And when those fears come up of, did I do it perfectly? Allowing space for them, being able to say, oh, I'm really triggered about if I did this perfectly, and I'm going to choose not to figure that out, and moving on.
Yeah, the only thing that I'll add is often the reason that people are having meta obsessions is because they had a horrible experience with OCD, got better, and they're so afraid of the presence. And I think one of the conversations that Liz has really led the charge is we don't want to get the word out that you're going to suffer forever. And we do want to remember that we may have waves. OCD may come back, but you can't be afraid of it. And that's typically where meta OCD appears, is people are like, but I've been doing good for 6 months. Why did I have this obsession today? And now that actually adds on to it and adds the stress and makes it worse. Instead of just being like, oh, OCD, you're here? Yeah, where have you been 7 months? You're boring. I'm going to go back to doing what I'm doing, right? So we can't be afraid in the face of obsessions, because that's not really where our power is. Our power is our relationship with those obsessions. Do we choose to power through? Do we choose to learn? Or do we go back to old, compulsive fears, which just reinforce the cycle we're trying to get rid of?
100%.
Another one is, what would exposures around relationship OCD look like? And do you involve the other person?
Great question. So relationship OCD is when individuals with OCD start to have triggers and anxiety around irrational thoughts with their relationship. So these are not thoughts like, like valid thoughts of just kind of more maybe GAD, or even sometimes we see like personality disorders can also really impact relationships that can look like OCD, of like we become obsessive about somebody, or a relationship that ended, very different than OCD. OCD is still unwanted intrusive thoughts. So a thought like, I know I love this person, but what if I don't? or I know I love this person, I want to be with them forever, but what if one day I decide I don't? And so the rituals could be things like confessing that, asking questions about it, reading about it, thinking about it, doing some checking, making sure you're still aroused, all these sort of things that reinforce that, oh, that thought could be valid and you need to be answering it. And so treatment is actually going to be being able to be present with your loved one, being able to allow space for those thoughts to be there, but again, choosing to not answer them. So it doesn't mean when you're with your loved one, you need to lean into, oh, maybe they're not the one. Maybe we shouldn't get married. Maybe this, I'm never going to be happy. That's not helpful. That's, Callie, Chris and I did a talk on this once, like that's about like accepting your worst case fears as truth. We don't need to do that. But instead, what we want to be able to do is lean into the opposite, right? So being able to say like, man, like, I'm really anxious about this and I'm going to choose not to figure it out. And I'm excited for the future we have together, which actually might be more triggering for someone with OCD to do and might be even the better exposure in ERP. As far as involving the loved one, if there is a lot of reassurance giving, a lot of confessing, and a lot of things happening, I do think it's really useful to at least pull them into 1 or 2 sessions so that the clinician can really help them explain the difference between how the person really feels versus OCD, because sometimes it's hard for people from the outside to not take this personal. Very similar if like a loved one becomes contaminated, that loved one often takes that personally, where actually like, it's just your OCD, and we want to make sure that we can explain that. So that can be really useful, obviously, to be able to do in the therapeutic setting. But really, majority of the work is going to be with the individual more than anything else. Although, of course, supportive work with a family member or spouse or significant other would be really useful.
Yeah, I would say too, like the whole idea behind relationship OCD, the most common experience is like, am I in the right relationship? Am I not? What always happens with all of these subtypes, it doesn't really matter, is somebody's trying to figure something out, but they're doing it in the wrong way. So most people don't try to figure out if they're in the right relationship by isolating themselves and ruminating in their heads. So I think that's a big thing that you have to always remember, is that, the treatment is much more about, with the information I have today, am I finding myself invested in the relationship, and is it meeting those most important needs of myself? One thing I always remind people with relationship OCD is there tends to be this kind of like fairy tale expectations, like we're supposed to be happy all the time, we're never supposed to fight, etc. Remember, relationships ebb and flow. So OCD will latch on to any argument, etc. But like Liz said, if it makes sense to bring the person in, I would agree.
Totally agree. And I know it's about time to start wrapping up. So maybe we'll do one more question. And then we've gotten a couple questions about the location of the conference that I think would be important for us to address. So Chris, I don't know if you have one more question that we should hop
I have
into.
2 more. So why don't I ask you one and then I'll answer the second one. So for you, it's my OCD is really loud and bad right before bed. Is this normal? And any ideas as to why?
Yeah, totally normal, right? And we see this all the time, that OCD and anxiety gets a lot louder when we're quieter. So often individuals will talk about the busier I am and the more I'm like out and about and stay busy, I find that my thoughts are a little bit quieter. I used to be one of these people, like before I was really in a place of freedom where I stayed as busy as I could 24/7 because I didn't want my thoughts to get loud. But unfortunately, I was really spending the day trying to suppress the thoughts, which meant that they were just waiting for space to come out, right, and to pop up. And so what I really want to say is that with effective treatment, right, if you're really leaning into these core fears and thoughts, you are going to be able to get to a place where you can be quiet and not have OCD and anxiety get loud. Because if you've actually addressed OCD and anxiety at the core, it's not going to be able to be loud when you're quiet because it's not still there. But if it's getting loud, that's a really good and good reminder for you to say, oh, here's what I still need to be working on. Here's some of the things I definitely still need to be addressing. With that being said, there are certainly tools that you can think about and do right now while you're in treatment when OCD gets louder. But again, the biggest thing I'll say is if you're going into bedtime saying to yourself, I hope I'm not triggered. I hope OCD doesn't get loud. I hope I don't have intrusive thoughts. You can almost guarantee OCD is going to get loud. You're going to have intrusive thoughts. You're going to be triggered. So actually try going into bed saying, wow, I'm probably going to get triggered. I'm probably going to have intrusive thoughts. And guess what? I'm not afraid of them. And you might start to see even just that language shift of kind of this bring it on attitude to OCD and anxiety versus I'm afraid of you might kind of shift the way it tries to attack you.
Well said. And then my final question is, when someone with OCD suffers from intrusive violent images, is the treatment different from intrusive thoughts? The reason I think this is an important question is people always assume OCD is only intrusive thoughts, but it can be intrusive feelings, sensations, urges, for instance, pushing someone in the street or jumping off of a cliff. But intrusive violent images can be what I experienced, like just being at Target and getting this image of like attacking the patron in front of me. I think the biggest thing that we have to remember is the more that we choose one intense side, the worse it becomes. Traditionally, most people pick the avoidance side. They have this thought, they try to block it, shake it out of their head, avoid the situation that it brings up. And by trying to push it away, you're literally just shoving it in your face. Or people make the other extreme mistake and give meaning to the thought. Why am I having this violent, image? Does it mean I'm a violent person? Why did it happen? And try to spend time with it. One thing that really helped me is just letting it play out. I imagined I was at a friend's house and they had the TV on while they're getting ready, and it was some show I wasn't interested. So I knew it was on, but I didn't hyper focus on it. I continued to engage with my friend while the show played. So when those thoughts would pop up, I'd let them play out. And what I noticed is by not giving it the attention and the fixation that I once did, they started to fade. Is the goal to start to like them? No, but the goal is to recognize that they aren't you. And I'd say lastly, the most helpful part of exposure and response prevention is don't avoid the situations that these thoughts tend to occur. Don't avoid songs or certain TV shows or public locations. When the thoughts pop up, let them coexist with you, let them kind of be present, and let them fade organically on their own. If you either fixate on them or try to push it away, it won't help. Now, a master's level treatment is bringing on those thoughts on your own. People hate doing that in treatment, but what I always tell people, it works. And when I deliberately brought on those intrusive violent images, it took the shock value out and it made it less triggering. And I got very clear that these thoughts are not associated with my values.
100%. So important to remember, treatment doesn't change, right? ERP and the core concepts of it are the same, but certainly depending on what you're dealing with and even your core fears, it should look a little bit different, right? Because it should be specific and tailored to you. None of us can have this generic treatment model that we use with all of our patients. It really should be specific for each patient. All right. Love you guys. So good to see y'all. Looking forward to seeing many of you. And of course, joining for our next live stream. Are we having a live stream next Wednesday, Chris?
No, because we'll be at the conference. So we're going to be back in 2 weeks, July 31st, 9 a.m. Pacific, 12 noon Eastern. And we're going to be talking about social anxiety. And we'll be joined by the great Natasha Daniel. And then Natasha will stick around in the second half. We'll answer your questions live about social anxiety and more. And it's always great to have a face join us, especially somebody that's so amazing.
So amazing. So excited to have Natasha there. So let's hop over to the conference. So I do want to acknowledge some of the comments that are being made and just give a little bit of context in what we're doing as a foundation. And Chris, of course, as a SIG leader, you may be able to contribute much more than I can about what's going on. But what I do want to say is that these conferences, the conference locations are planned out many, many years in advance. This is not something that was planned out in recent years. And the location was decided on years and years ago. I think it was like 6 or 8 years ago. I can't remember, Chris, but before 8 years ago. So much in advance of kind of, obviously the current climate that exists. What I do want to say is that as a foundation, and we were not able to change the locations, and we decided that it made the most sense for us to provide support, resources, and education in the state that we're going to. It wouldn't have that there could have also been, obviously there's no perfect scenario, there's no perfect answer, but that it is really important that we are also supporting the community and the clinicians in that arena. With that being said, we're working really hard to make sure that individuals feel as safe as possible, feel as supported as possible. And we are doing lots of different things to do that. We've also created task force and different groups to make sure that we have this front of mind and that this is a priority of the foundation. I don't want any of us to feel like we are ignoring or dismissing this. And Chris, if you want to share a little bit about some of those specifics.
Yeah, I mean, I first want to validate some of the comments. I think, being a member of the LGBTQ community and being the SIG leader and founder of the LGBTQ special interest group, I had a lot of people conflicted, and we were struggling because, it was planned 8 years out. You can't get, your money back. It would have completely sunk the foundation's budget, as well as not being able to have a conference. And so I met with a lot of queer people, and we were really just kind of brainstorming, and it sucks. I mean, I'm not going to sugarcoat. I totally, everything that people are saying, I agree with you. If I could personally be wealthy enough to move it somewhere else, and at the same time, there was a lot of people in our special interest group that are people of the LGBT community in Florida, and they're like, but we need resources, we need help. So what I have done, and this started about a year ago in the SIG, is we've done everything possible we can do as a special interest group to ensure that people have community and connection. So the very first evening before the conference really starts on Friday at 8 p.m., the LGBTQ SIG is hosting our meeting, our hangout, and our connection night, so that people can find groups of people. So if they do want to leave the hotel and eat together, that they can be in a group, that they can stay together throughout the conference to have that support. It's led by all three of us, actually. Two of us are licensed clinicians. One of the leaders is in grad school to be a clinician. So if there's anybody that's really struggling mental health wise, we also have a task force. So we're going to do everything where they're there to make sure that it's very clear that the IOCDF supports the LGBT community, is not aligned with some of the negative and harmful laws and messaging out of that state. And I can say on the back end, I'm on 2 different LGBT talks, and we're really addressing this, and we're really providing information and education for both people in the community, but also for clinicians to really understand why it's important to be supportive of this community. Rogers put out a study that about 30% of the kids that were in their residential identified as part of the community. So we know people with OCD are also queer, and we want to make sure that they're supported. So we're going to do everything in-house to make sure people know. I'm glad to say it's in a city that's Orlando. It's a little bit more progressive in its ideas around the queer community. And at the same time, I want to validate your feelings. And for me personally, had a lot of internal conflict, and there was just not a good way to land. And when I found out we just couldn't move the location, what I've been doing, and the SIG has been doing, and the foundation has been doing for the last year, is hearing voices from people of color, from women, from queer people, to really say, like, what do we need to do to make you feel safe, feel comfortable, as well as including organizations. We're having Orlando, the center in Orlando is going to come out. There's going to be a lot of organizations that are aligned with LGBT community to kind of provide resources and support and information. So I know there's going to still be some people that are just not happy with the decision, and it breaks my heart, because obviously being part of the community and a leader of a SIG, I want everybody in my community to be happy and comfortable. But just know it has been so important for us, and we've done everything possible. And I'm so sorry if we disappoint you. And I hope that you can come to a future conference in Chicago or Seattle or New York, because we value your opinions and we value you as a member of the OCD community. And you can definitely reach out to me directly if you have any concerns, and I can let you know the activities the SIG has provided, so that you can feel safe, comfortable, wanted, and welcomed.
100%. Thanks, you guys. It's good to see you all. We love you guys. I know lots of heavy things, like I said, to start this off today, going on in our world and where we're at. And so just want to always send our love and support.
Yeah, and I do want to say we found a hotel that is friendly. There's a lot of concerns about bathroom usage and speaking about certain topics, and we made sure that the hotel was absolutely aligned with our messaging, and they are. Anybody that's going to the conference, please come up to Liz and I. We get so geeked out and excited. You're like celebrities to us. We're like, oh my God, you watch us. Hopefully you don't hate us, right? So please come up to say hi to us. But I'm so excited to see all you in person. I hope you go to the virtual option if you can't, and then join Liz and I. Will be back here answering your questions and offering you resources, education, and support on Wednesday, July 31st. And for everybody in Houston, along with Liz, we're definitely keeping you in our thoughts and our hearts. We want to make sure that you all are safe, and take care. We'll see you soon.
Bye, guys.